Good evening, everybody. Monday Morning Quarterback, episode 99. We're one away from the 100th episode. So, have some race results to report this week. So, that's awesome. That means things are getting back to normal. The one thing that isn't normal, Facebook changed their live again. So, I hope you can hear me. If somebody wants to comment, I want to make sure I can see the comments. Because they jumbled all this up again. And last week it let me go back to the previous version, but this week it's not letting me. So, okay, perfect. Steve Osborne, thank you. I can see your message. So good. So it's working. Awesome. So some places got to race this weekend. Kind of sporadically. California raced at a couple places. Thank you all for chiming in. My wife still loves me. She had probably not a very special Mother's Day yesterday, but a Mother's Day with me home and the kids. So, but anyway, California, they raced at Marysville and Dixon, and so Corey Day got the Wing Outlaw win out there in the D1 house car with our shock, so that was cool to see. And then Oklahoma raced a few different micro tracks. Harley Holland won the Outlaw race there one night on our stuff. I didn't get to see all the results. There's a couple different tracks. And then Texas, they raced a couple places. Tyler Drucke got a win, wing sprint car win for us, I believe in Nebraska, but I'm not certain where he was. There was the Outlaws were at Knoxville, and that was a great race. And big win for us was Tyler Courtney at Farmington, Missouri on Saturday night. There was 50 sprint cars there, and that team, the Clausen Marshall team, is doing some more wing racing this year, and honored that they stuck with us. We've been working with them for a long time on their midgets and sprint cars, and we're probably not the shock of choice for wing sprint cars, even though I feel really good about our product. But they felt like they could work with us and build their program with us, and so we've been working and developing. They ran that new package for the very first time and picked up a big win, so that was cool. And extra special for CSI because our shop foreman, Jake Argo, is the crew chief on that car this year on the wing side, so double good for us. We've been working really hard on our wing program the last few years, and I feel like we just haven't been in the right place to showcase the fruits of our labor. And hopefully now with Sunshine running our stuff in the Wing 410s, that's going to help. We've always had a pretty good Wing 360 program and been up front at ASCS national races and won those and won a lot of big Wing 360 races. But where we're at geographically, there's really no wing racing. So I'm super passionate about wing racing. That's what I grew up around. And so cool to be back in Wing 410 racing with a good team and an awesome driver. So that was a cool win. Who else won? Maybe I mentioned all of our winners for the weekend, but I'm excited just to say we went racing. Even better that we actually won some races. So hopefully that continues to grow. On Race Monitor and my Race Pass, I saw 12 to 15 tracks racing or so. So hopefully that just continues to grow every week, and these other governors and states realize that people weren't dropping dead in the stands because of the coronavirus. So let's get back to racing and open the country back up. But what I wanted to talk about tonight, which I'm working on a two-part, so next week is 100, and that's a obviously very important episode for us. So talking with some folks, we get a lot of questions on how do you know what change to make, how far do you go, what's that look like, what's that thought process look like. So I'm going to break down tonight how I analyze it as a crew chief. I don't do a lot of crew chiefing anymore, but I still do some every now and again. Did Chili Bowl a couple of years ago, and obviously do my kids' quarter midget program. But that's I grew up working on race cars and crew chiefing, USAC cars, and then just decided to specialize in shocks, and especially more so when I went IndyCar racing. But so I'll let you know what my thought process is and how I break down those things, and I learned that from just my years of working with different people. I've been extremely fortunate throughout my career to work with some really, really bright people in the sport. I feel like the different levels of racing and the different platforms of racing I did, I always seem to end up with one of the brightest people in that. And so whether that, when I was a kid, I spent some time on the road with Sammy Swindell on the Outlaws. Then when I moved back here in USAC, I worked with Bob East, and IndyCar, I worked at Andretti's, and then NASCAR, I worked for Rusty Wallace. So I learned a lot about how those guys built their teams, managed their teams, and just went through day-to-day operations and how they manage their race day. And that, at the end of the day, how you manage your race day is a big part of being successful. So I'll go through that this week, kind of how I feel and what I do there. And then next week, working on having a guest that will give us a driver's perspective of that. So they can talk about if they roll on the racetrack and the car's not quite suiting their needs, maybe how they would adjust their line to compensate for that, or whether it be in-cockpit adjustments, what that would look like in their thought process behind the wheel. So kind of a two-part segment, and hopefully later this week we'll be able to announce who that special guest is for episode 100. But without further ado, I'll jump into what I'm going to talk about tonight. And if you have questions, comment. I keep glancing over because this new Facebook only shows me the 5 most recent comments, so I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. So fire away with questions if you have questions. But I'm going to jump into my topic tonight. So a couple of the things leading up to before you even getting to the racetrack is being very organized in your notes and your thoughts, so you have a good game plan when you get there. Okay, so a lot of times the amount of time you have to make these decisions is minimal, and what I mean by that is you might not know that the water truck's going to go on the track till right before you roll out, or vice versa. You might not know that the temperature is going to drop, or things just change. The tracks went from the top to the bottom, and you got to make a quick decision. And the more organized you are leading up to that, you're going to be able to make the most educated decision, number one, and you're going to be able to make that decision in a timely manner. So obviously pit logic can help you with that a bunch, but you just want to be very organized in your thought process and make sure you're making the most educated decision you can. So when I go to look at a setup change, the number one thing I ask customers when they call with questions is, what's your biggest limiting factor? Limiting factor to going faster, to getting the driver more comfortable. What's the number one problem? Let's try to fix that first. And then I try to break that down. If it's, for example, the car will not rotate in the center of the corner. It's too tight in the center of the corner. And that's causing it to push on the exit, and we're not in the line we need to be because, we're either hung out in the middle of the racetrack in the slick on the dirt, or quarter midgets were giving up too much ground on the asphalt because this tight condition in the center of the corner. Well, I always try to go one phase before that. So before the center of the corner, we would have the entry to the corner. And is the problem starting there? A lot of times your problem on the exit actually started on the entrance. So was the car so free on entry that the driver wasn't feeding it wheel to the left. Instead, he was kind of guarding to the right. And then when he got to the center of the corner and he needed to turn left, by that point it was too late. He'd already missed the apex. Was that the real issue? So I always look at the entry first and then determine if the entry is the issue causing your mid to exit issue. Let's fix that entry, because a lot of times if we fix the entry, it'll fix the other part. The other thing is how big of a problem is it? You know, scale of 1 to 10 or percentage. Is it a major issue, or is it a minor? And that's going to lead you down the road of how big of an adjustment you need to make. Another thing to consider is when you're making any chassis adjustment, for every action there's a reaction. So for whatever you're trying to cure, it could potentially have an adverse effect somewhere else. And so think that through, and don't make too many adjustments at once, because if you make a bunch of adjustments, you might not know what exactly worked and what didn't. So be calculated in your choices. Another thing to think through is you're getting this feedback from the driver, or you visually saw this, and you're going to make an adjustment, but what's going to change in the track between the time you got that feedback or you visually saw that characteristic in the car? What's going to change between now and when you go on the track again? Is the track going to slow down, speed up? Maybe the track's going to come to you, so don't over adjust. Don't make this change when you really didn't need to make a change. I shared last week that with all of the apps and technologies, you know, Race Monitor, My Race Pass, I pay very, very close attention to how much the track is speeding up or slowing down throughout the night, especially on the dirt. Okay, on the asphalt, I always have my stopwatch in my pocket, but I pay attention to track temperature just as much. But on the dirt, what's the track time doing? Because sometimes some of these tracks aren't lit very well, and you maybe can't see exactly. The pits are out on one end of the track, and you can't see the other end of the track. But the stopwatch doesn't lie. So based on how much the track is slowing down, that is going to lead me to how big of an adjustment I need to make. Okay. So those are some things to consider when you're thinking through what kind of change to make, how big of a change to make. Because there's certainly, if you're trying to fix that tight in the center of the corner, there's a number of things you can do, and some are more powerful than others. And so which one best suits your need, okay? So that's something else I would really consider as far as that goes. But a lot of it comes down to being very organized and having a game plan. So whether that's having all your tires rolled out so you know all your staggers before you get to the racetrack. So boom, okay, maybe I need another ½ inch of stagger, and these are the tires that are going to do it for me, and having it. And you're not running around measuring every tire in the trailer on the spot trying to find it, and you maybe miss something else. You're in there measuring stagger, and they went out and farmed the track, and you didn't even catch it. Pits are far away from the track at this place. So the more you're organized, the more you're prepared when you leave your shop, the better off you're going to be as far as making those educated choices in a timely fashion. Does that make sense to everybody that's chimed in? I'm a little out of sorts with trying to see the comments and what's going on over here. So that's kind of my train of thought when I go to make a chassis adjustment is, where's it happening for sure? Entry, middle, or exit? How big of a handling issue is this? 1 through 10. And then what are a couple of my options setup wise to cure that? Of those options, what's the most powerful? What of those options is going to have the least adverse effect on something else? And how's the track going to change between now and the time I go on it again? Is the track conditions going to change favorably for me, or is it going to make my condition worse, and now I need to make a bigger adjustment? Hudson's comments aren't making any sense if anybody's paying attention. Headed to Texas for quarter midgets next week. That's awesome. Cool track. I've been to a couple of those tracks. Back when USAC did the national series at racetracks, we did San Antonio one year, and then the year that Austin Club had it, we did it at Circuit of America. But yeah, cool tracks. I'm glad you're getting to go. We're looking at maybe going to Georgia in a couple weeks. There's a big race down there, and if nothing's happening here, we might smoke it down to Georgia. So. Kevin Crum, if I'm happy with my car when the night begins, what adjustments do you like to use to keep up as the track goes away? So typically for the dirt, stagger is a big one as the track goes away. Probably needing to shed stagger throughout the night, right rear wheel spacing and air pressure in the right rear. I like to, if my car has a good balance and I feel good about where the car is, I try to just make nice subtle changes to keep up with the track without getting the car too out of balance. So dirt, those are typically your go-tos is stagger, right rear wheel spacing, right rear air pressure. If it's a wing car, wing position is another one. And then potentially moving some weight around based on what you and your driver like. Raising the nose, or I like to add left rear weight when the track gets slick. On the dirt. On the asphalt, quarter midget wise, typically it's ride height for me. If my car has a really good balance and the track's going to lose or gain grip, I'll lower the car if the track's getting grippy, or if it's losing grip, I'll raise the whole car. That way I'm not changing my cross weight. I'm not really changing the balance of the car, just changing the roll center for more or less grip. Air pressure also on a quarter midget to try to keep the car balanced, but adjust for different levels of grip. Pavement midgets and sprint cars, they're very cross weight sensitive, so we would, add a couple percent or remove a couple percent of cross weight based on what the track's doing. So yeah, good question. Anybody else have any questions for us on episode 99? Does anybody want to guess who the special guest is going to be next week? I'm probably not going to tell you, but I'm curious who you guys think it might be. Steve Osborne, sorry, I missed your question. What's the rebound difference between your baseline and a QM 3.2 versus 3.1? How many pounds difference? I could probably look that up here real quick. I don't know off the top of my head. It's not much. It's 3 or 4 pounds is my guess. But I'm going to look and give you the exact because I just printed our quarter midget tolerances the other day. Yeah, right around 3 pounds. So a stiff 1 and a soft 2 is only going to be about 1.5 pounds difference. So yeah, quarter midget valvings are really, really close. So like I'm looking at this sheet, and our one valve is 9 to 11 pounds, and then our 2 valve is 12 to 15, 2.5, 15 to 18. So yeah, it's quarter midgets are pretty soft. Matt Kendall, I've noticed some guys put race shocks on at the track. Is it best not to haul the cars with the race shocks? I personally am not one that is bothered by going to the racetrack with the shocks on it. Honestly, you'll probably wear your torsion bars out before you'll wear your shocks out. So yeah, I travel to the track with the shocks on the car. Not really an issue. You're not gonna. I've told people before, if they can't handle the ride to the racetrack, they're never gonna be worth a damn on the track. So that shouldn't be an issue. Jeff, yes, if you're in an instance where you are blocking your car to get your ride heights, which is obviously very common in midgets and sprint cars, When I say raise the car, I mean raise the chassis. So it would be a shorter block height. Sharply, if I could get Drew Brees to be a special guest on Monday Morning Quarterback, I'd be doing something right. Patrick Mahomes, he's overrated, man. He got lucky. Got lucky last year. Lucky didn't play the Saints, or it'd have been over. But anybody else have any questions tonight? And also, I uploaded all of the most recent Monday Morning Quarterbacks to our YouTube page. So if you want to, if you want to catch up on some, they're nice and cataloged there on YouTube. Or if you have friends who aren't Facebookers, they can find them on YouTube. J-Rod, Sammy Hawkins from Dirty Driving, Thunder Cars of Indiana. If anybody watching has not seen Dirty Driving, Thunder Cars of Indiana, it is maybe the most underrated documentary in the history of documentaries. It's a documentary HBO did on Anderson Speedway, home of the Little 500, which is an awesome race. If you're a race fan, I highly recommend catching the Little 500. But the show was featured around the Thunder Car division there, and quite a cast of characters. Sammy Hawkins was one of the head characters. I heard a podcast that, it was a Rip the Fence, podcast that Sean Buckley, Jack Slash, was on last week. And I knew this, but I'd forgotten until he'd said it, that Rico from Fatheads, for his birthday one year, purchased him the velvet painting of the naked lady that Sammy Hawkins had in his house on the show. So shortly after the show, trying to cash in on their, the fact that they were famous for 30 minutes, those guys were selling everything they owned that they had from that show. And Sammy eBayed that naked lady velvet painting, and Rico from Fatheads bought it for Buckley, and he's still got it. So fun fact. Steve Osborne, is 3 pounds on rebound a big difference for the left rear? I always look at percentages, right? So if we're talking a sprint car, 3 pounds you're never going to feel because it's 300 pounds, so it's like a 1% change. On a quarter midget, it's a sizable percentage change. However, that's not the most powerful change in a quarter midget, believe it or not. I would love to tell you 3 pounds on your rebound is do or die in quarter midgets, even though it's a fairly big percentage of the shock dampening. It's not as powerful of a change as you'd think. In my testing, I would say if 1 is a minute change and 10 is a huge change, it's a 3. So definitely a nice tuning tool to help get you that last little bit, but it's not going to correct a poor handling race car or make a car handle poorly. It's a pretty small change. So, no other questions. We're going to sign off for tonight then. We thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned for episode 100 next week. Hope you have a great week. Take care.